Welcome back. Here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Russian forces continue to target cities across Ukraine, with shelling continuing in the capital city of Kyiv. As per latest from the US Embassy in Kyiv, Russian forces have shot and killed 10 people standing in the line for bread in Chernihiv. Ukraine has also rejected Russia's neutrality proposals. Putin has said that Russia's military operation in Ukraine is a success and that Russia will not allow Ukraine to become springboard to threaten Russia. The UK Ministry of Defense, meanwhile, claims that Moscow's forces are struggling to maintain the pace of their advance across Ukraine. Security officials said that Russian troops are struggling to overcome challenges posed by Ukraine's terrain, which has confined them to the country's roads and highways. Ukraine has claimed that Russia has caused $500 billion in damages since the invasion began. And joining us on the broadcast right now is my colleague Jonathan, tracking the developments very, very closely in Ukraine. Jonathan, good evening. Thank you for joining us live this evening. Tell us exactly where you are right now and how is the situation like on day 21 of this invasion, because talks have not really yielded much so far.
Well, I'm, as ever, in Lviv in western Ukraine, which is the main hub for the resistance, I suppose you could say, and also the principal transit point for the huge numbers of refugees that are currently still leaving this country. On the ground, things really very much business as usual, incessant shelling, as you say, that absolutely tragic tale of 10 people reported dead in an artillery strike outside a bakery. It's these little human stories that really tug at the heartstrings, even within this massive bloodshed, because these people didn't want this war. They didn't call for it. They're just trying to feed their families and go about their business. They go out to buy some bread and they end up dead. The other major strike was on a television tower in the previously untouched or relatively untouched town of Vinnytsia, which strikes me as curious because this is very much old school information warfare. It's one of several TV towers that Russia has now taken out. Obviously, they're alarmed at the propaganda power and spread of President Zelensky's message, and are trying to prevent that getting through. One forgets that although the younger generation are very conversant with internet communications, a lot of old people still get their news principally through the airwaves. So it's a bit of a throwback, but Russia is bombing television towers. The other most alarming news for me today is that the Russian Navy has begun to start shelling the Black Sea coast. Now, this war has so far featured next to no naval operations whatsoever, but we know already that Russia's overarching strategy in the south is to try and join up the east and the south, specifically the vital port city of Odessa. And if they've started to shell, then that may well indicate the first stages of an anticipated D-Day style amphibious landing. And that's very bad news indeed for the residents of Odessa and for the Ukrainian war effort in general.
Right. Jonathan, I will also request you to show us around. But before that, let me also go across to my colleague Pradeep Datta, who has been tracking the developments very, very closely from Ukraine as well. Pradeep, good evening. You've been bringing to us stories of despair and helplessness every single day. But the story that you brought to us today also suggested how the Ukrainian spirit is ensuring that Russian troops stay away from the capital city of Kyiv. What did you see today? Explain to our viewers. And is it still the western part, which is still the safer zone as far as Ukraine is concerned? Or do you think, the Russian troops are also moving towards and targeting west?
See, what Russians are right now trying to do, they are trying to widen the horizon of their attack. We have seen that now they have started their movement towards the westward side also. Just only 3 days back, they had targeted a military base. So no region, in fact, in Ukraine, we can say is safe. Anything can happen anytime, as Jonathan was talking about. That earlier it was only the land and the air force that was used. But now we have seen that they are, in fact, about to use even the naval ships. So that's really going to be more difficult situation. As far as the civilians are concerned, you rightly said that the spirit that we are talking about, that how in fact these forces are trying to move ahead or to break that resilience, to break that resistance. So far, they haven't succeeded from day one. I saw that the women, they're making confectionery for armed forces. I saw that how there's a young band coming, performing. They're trying to pep up the mood, motivate people around. In fact, trying to bring smile on their grim and sullen faces, and also trying to send a message loud and clear to armed forces that they need not worry about people are with them. Because when people and army are together, I think the God is also going to help them. That's exactly has happened. That's one of the reasons that even after 21 days, we have seen it's the fourth week now, the Russians have not able to occupy Kyiv, because that's how they felt that they will be able to achieve their political objective. What is more important to Russia is achieving their political objective. Why they're fighting a war? It's not only about the tactical military victory, whether it's in Kharkiv, Sumy, Mariupol, or any other area. It's basically about achieving political objective, and their political objective is to topple, to throw him away, and to have their own puppet president installed, and to call shots from Kyiv. And second thing is to bring Ukrainian army on knees. So far, they haven't succeeded in this regard. Reason being that they had not been very good so far as urban warfare is concerned. Whenever they have tried to target or enter any of those urban areas, they had been inflicted heavy losses by Ukrainian army. And I think Ukrainian army that way had been fighting a very smart war. And now they are trying to target the telecommunication network also, communication network also. As Jonathan was talking about the television tower, this is the second one being targeted during the last 4 or 5 days. Earlier, we saw that similar situation. The one tower was targeted in Kyiv area also. Why they want to target? Because they feel that if they will, it's all about the communication warfare. If you will be the country that's able to tell a good story, or the country that's able to dominate so far as the communication network is concerned, half of the war is also about the psychological warfare, where you are going to have a psychological edge over other. That's one of the reason that we have seen that each one are trying to outdo others so far as the social media is concerned, so far as the television waves are concerned. So they are trying to target. They do not want president's message to reach to most of the people, because president, even after being targeted incessantly and indiscriminately by the Russian forces, 3-4 attempts have been made on his life, but still he's stronger. He's very much in Kyiv, and he's always sending a message loud and clear from there that he's with the armed forces, he's with the people, and they are going to fight till last breath. I think that's really more important. That spirit, so far, the Russians have not succeeded in breaking. I think that is what actually is keeping them alive and going strong against the mighty Russian army.
Well, absolutely. Jonathan, it's also the story of courage of Ukrainians that needs to be highlighted. But the most heartbreaking story today we got was about 10 people waiting for bread getting killed in Russian attack in North Ukraine. If you could also tell us a little bit more about this incident, and if you could just show us around a little bit how exactly the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, this, to the best of our understanding, this happened in the town of Chernihiv, which is some miles north of Ukraine. This is all we know, really, that 10 people died in an artillery strike. Look, we've heard so much about artillery in the course of this war, and many of the people watching this perhaps have never witnessed artillery. It is gruesome, it is horrible, it is unexpected, it is utterly indiscriminate, and it is merciless. 1 minute you're standing there, next minute, boom. You could be dead. The people around you could be dead. Largely, people die as a result of shrapnel injuries from an artillery strike, but it just comes out of nowhere. And the thought of these 10 odd people, probably in a queue for bread or, you know, household goods, dying in a spate of a single second is absolutely chilling and heartbreaking.
All right, Jonathan, as well as Pradeep, appreciate both of you for the moment for joining us with all of those details from Ukraine this evening. We'll keep coming back to you for more on this. Stay safe, both of you. And due to this ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine, viewers, crude oil prices have been on fire. However, in the last 2 days, there has been a slight dip in crude oil price. To help us understand the impact of this crisis on crude and what it means for a country like India, we have with us Vikram Mehta, former CEO of Shell India. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehta, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. What is your assessment of crude oil price over the last few days? After touching $139 per barrel, it has fallen below $100. Is the dip temporary, or is oil out of the boiling stage now?
It's difficult to give a prognosis of oil price trajectories because oil prices are based on a number of variables. What we do know is that the future trajectory will be volatile. What we don't know is the nature of the volatility. Will it be volatile upwards or will it be volatile downwards? The oil prices are determined by a combination of supply and demand, geopolitics, exchange rate movements, speculative trade, and of course, the predilections of individual leaders who have plenipotentiary authority over energy policy in their country, specifically the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, President Putin, and there are a number of other people that I can think of. Specifically, the price of oil in today's market will be determined by the duration of the conflict in Ukraine. We don't know how long that's going to be and what the impact of that conflict will be on demand globally. It will also be determined by the countervailing supply side measures that various countries and industry players take. What will be the drawdown of inventory or strategic reserves by the International Energy Community, International Energy Agency? Will Iran release up to 1 million barrels a day of crude oil? And this is on the assumption that the current negotiations for the nuclear deal with Iran gets resurrected and signed. Will Saudi Arabia release some part of the spare capacity that it has? They're under pressure from the US government to do so. So these are some of the variables that currently impact oil prices. And as you can see, it's very difficult to project whether the prices are going to move up or go down or stay where they are. What we do know, of course, is that if the sanctions currently on Russian crude oil exports of oil and gas were to widen beyond USA, the impact on oil prices will be sharp and it will ratchet upwards, perhaps even to as high as $150 and above.
Mr. Mehta, you're also Chairman, Center for Social and Economic Progress, CSEP. You understand the oil market, the energy market quite well. Now, reports are suggesting that Indian government is finalizing a deal with Russia to buy its crude at deep discount. Do you think it's a good decision?
This is a delicate issue. My personal view is that India must not compromise its principles in order to make short-term profits. This translates into two acts. One is that India must not buy assets in Russia that have been left behind by companies that have walked away because of their objection to Russian action. But at the same time, it also leaves open the question as to whether India should transact with Russia for the purchase of crude oil on an arm's length basis. Now here, the moral dilemma is less ambivalent. I'm supportive of India purchasing crude oil for several reasons. One is that if it did not purchase crude oil from the market, then it would, of course, deepen the humanitarian issues that are confronting the globe. We would have a problem in our country, and that in itself is something to avoid. Second is that if Russian crude oil were to be cut off from the international market, as I've already just mentioned, the price of oil will go through the roof, and that will also have a major impact globally on people and public welfare. Thirdly, there is no sanction against Russian crude oil exports. So, in short, I would think it's morally wrong and unprincipled if India sought to make profits out of the crisis that has been provoked by what is clearly an infringement of another country's sovereignty. But on the other hand, I do not think that India is morally out of line by looking to acquire crude oil on an arm's length basis.
You know, many people clearly are questioning this particular decision, but given our economic situation, because we import crude, we depend heavily on import of crude, prices are quite high and it's going to have an impact on our inflation scenario as well. So you think it'll be prudent to buy Russian oil even though US has made it untouchable?
Well, the question is whether we should buy crude oil from Russia. Does that make economic sense? Yes, it makes economic sense, but there is, of course, a larger issue here as to whether we should be transacting with Russia at all. And here, I would like to make a distinction between the acquisition of assets in Russia, that is hard assets in Russia, or the enhancement of our equity interest in Russian assets. I would like to make a distinction between that and the acquisition of crude oil on the international market. The latter is an arm's length, or should be an arm's length transaction that we engage in order to meet our energy requirements. And there are good reasons why we should proceed with that. One is that if we did not do so, there would be a public welfare impact, adverse public welfare impact on our country, on our citizens. Second is that Russian crude oil is not sanctioned. And thirdly is that if Russian crude oil was taken off the international market, the price of oil would ratchet upwards very sharply, perhaps reaching to levels of 150. However, there are some very cheap assets now available in Russia. And this is because of the termination or withdrawal from of major international companies from their shareholding and from their business relations in Russia. So BP has a 20% stake in Rosneft, the national oil company of Russia. It has decided to leave from that partnership, and it will be impairing $25 billion of value on its balance sheet. Exxon has a shareholding in a company in which ONGC also has a shareholding. Exxon has also decided to withdraw from that company. ONGC could well purchase the shares of Exxon. Now, on this, I would say India should not exercise these options. It would be seen as unprincipled, it would be seen as opportunistic, and I would not support that. So just to be very clear, there is a distinction between the acquisition of crude oil on the open market in an arm's length, through an arm's length transaction that is for purposes that are directed towards meeting our public welfare requirements, and then there is the opportunity to make short-term profits. I would certainly advise against leveraging the current crisis to make profits, to make short-term profits. I would be opposed to abridging or compromising our principles to make short-term profits.
I want to understand from you, why has been the dependence on Russian oil so low for a country like India?
Well, that's a very simple answer. Russian oil is generally heavy oil, and our refineries are by and large not capable of processing that oil into products that we need. Whereas the Middle East oil is lighter oil, and and our refineries are able to process it for the products that we need.
So in that case, what India is trying to do right now to address is crude concern by importing some oil from Russia. It'll just be a temporary solution, isn't it?
Oh, we will. Of course, we will. We import 85% of our crude oil, and before this crisis, started, we imported no more than 2 to 3% from Russia, and our requirement from Russia will not go very much higher than that, even today, even after the offer that Russia has made. The point that is being made is that Russia is now finding it very difficult to place their crude oil, and so the price of Russian crude oil has fallen, and India is actually acquiring crude oil on the international market. It's not as if the price it's offering, it's getting a particularly discounted price. Russian price is discounted because Russian crude oil is difficult to place in the market. And we are just buying crude oil, which is not sanctioned, okay? Just as Germany is buying from Russia, and just as America went to Venezuela recently to see if they could buy from that country, even though they have sanctioned Venezuela and they don't even recognize President Maduro.
All right, Mr. Vikram Mehta, thank you very much for talking to us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now and helping us understand the impact that the rise in crude price could really have on India and the options that are available for India in a situation like this. Mr. Vikram Mehta, Chairman, Center for Social and Economic Progress, speaking to Mirror Now this evening.